Namaskar, a warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is VC Pramod and with me is Renuka, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines: Pakistan Supreme Court reinstates National Assembly, orders voting on no trust motion on the 9th of April. New Delhi says it is focusing on stabilizing economic relations with Russia and watching developments in Sri Lanka to help mitigate economic situation. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh to lead Indian delegation at 2+2 India-US talks to be held on the 11th of April in Washington. India's agricultural products exports cross $50 billion for the first time. Yemen president cedes powers to council as Saudi Arabia pushes to end war. Yoga Mahotsav celebrated at Red Fort in New Delhi on World Health Day. In Korea Open Badminton Championship, PV Sindhu and Kidambi Srikanth storm into quarterfinals in their respective categories at Suncheon. And in IPL cricket, Delhi Capitals set a victory target of 150 runs before Lucknow Super Giants in Mumbai. In a setback for Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan, the country's Supreme Court on Thursday set aside the rejection of the no-confidence motion moved by the opposition against his Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf PTI government in the National Assembly. A five-judge bench of the Pakistan Supreme Court has delivered a unanimous verdict terming the National Assembly Deputy Speaker's decision to dismiss the no-confidence motion against Imran Khan government as unconstitutional. The bench has ordered the reinstatement of the National Assembly in contravention of President Arif Alvi's decision to dissolve the lower house of Pakistan's parliament. In addition, opposition parties have been granted permission to hold the no-confidence motion against the Imran Khan government. The court has ordered voting on no trust motion on the 9th of April. The Supreme Court has also declared the order of fresh elections as null and void. The Pakistani rupee has fallen to an all-time low of 188 rupees on Thursday against the US dollar in the interbank market amid the political and constitutional crisis. Meanwhile, Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz PMLN leader Shehbaz Sharif accused Prime Minister Imran Khan of running away after leaving a legacy of broken economy.
External Affairs Ministry has said that India has established economic relations with Russia and focus is on stabilizing these relations in the current circumstances. Replying to a query on US Deputy NSA Dalip Singh's remarks on India's trade with Russia, Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said, India has been very open about it and clear regarding its position. He emphasized that energy flows to Europe are continuing and fertilizer purchasing has been insulated. He stressed that political coloring should not be attributed to India's actions.
We have an established economic relations with Russia. We are aware of, we've been saying it. Given the current circumstances, post-developments in Ukraine, I think there is an effort by both sides to ensure that this economic relationship remains stable, and that's why we're saying stabilized. Because this relationship exists and it's in our interest to make sure some of this economic activity continues, and we are trying to see how we can keep that stable in that context.
India has welcomed the announcement of a 2-month ceasefire in the Yemen conflict from the 2nd of April. Briefing media in New Delhi, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said, India hopes this truce will lead to a comprehensive and durable ceasefire and build positive momentum towards an inclusive political process to end the 8-year-long conflict in Yemen. On Sri Lanka, Mr. Bagchi said, India is watching the developments closely as it is a neighbor and a close friend.
We are a neighbor and a close friend. There have been evolving economic situation there as well as other developments. We have extended assistance to put it together about $2.5 billion worth during the past 2-3 months, I would say. Includes credit facilities for fuel and food, which are most required. Since mid-March, over 270,000 metric tons diesel and petrol have been delivered to Sri Lanka. In addition, 40,000 tons of rice have been supplied under the recently extended $1 billion credit facility. I just want to emphasize the relationship between India and Sri Lanka is rooted in shared civilizational values.
Mr. Bagchi said the relationship between India and Sri Lanka is rooted in shared civilization values and aspirations of the people, and cooperation based on commonality and interest has been strengthened in recent months. He added that India stands ready to continue working with Sri Lanka for rapid post-COVID economic recovery, and this is in line with India's neighbourhood first policy. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on political crisis in Sri Lanka. In conversation are Anil Kumar Tringuniap, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the situation in Sri Lanka, where we have seen things worsen very rapidly. We have seen protests happening and the government in a crisis as the country faces an economic and political crisis. Ambassador Tringuniap, when you see what is happening in Sri Lanka and we see protests happening, people out on the streets, one, what do you make of the situation and what are the factors that you primarily attribute to what is happening in Sri Lanka?
Well, Samratji, the situation there is extremely grave and serious. This is an accumulation of many years of financial, I would say, mismanagement or borrowing heavy debts from China for projects that were not financially viable or were not paying any returns. Certain policies that they took, for example, in the sector of agriculture, when the Rajapaksa government decided that they will only have organic agriculture and there will be no use of chemical fertilizers. Overnight, they decided. And in a country where you have 70% of the people who are dependent on agriculture, you can imagine the kind of impact it will have. Then, of course, there was a taxation. They said people up to 30 lakh rupees will not pay any taxes, so your income became less. And on the other hand, you also saw the effect of pandemic. In the last 2 years, we have seen that virtually their tourism, which contributes to a significant amount of foreign exchange, income, was completely decimated. There was zero, really. And before that, in 2019, when they had the terror attacks, at that time also already the people started becoming very and careful about the security situation in the country. So all these factors combined, of course, financial and other mismanagement that has happened has caused the situation to this position, that they don't have fuel, they don't have food, they don't have medicine supplies. At least the distribution has been totally impacted. And countries like India have helped them a great deal. But at the same time, then also, since 2019, and that is the year, unfortunately, for Sri Lanka, that it graduated to a middle-income country that very year. And that from there on, in last 3 years, we have seen where it has reached again. And today, it is a completely, in a way, bankrupt country. Their foreign exchange reserves are less than $1 billion, whereas they have to pay more than $7 billion in debts. So they are talking to China to revise or to defer the payments. But at the same time, the situation is really very, very difficult. I was there only about last week, and I have seen it all evolving, and people are really very, very frustrated. And that's why the temporary measures will not do. There will have to be structural changes, which will, at all levels, frankly, from governance down to the basic grassroots level economics.
Ambassador Tringuniap, we also saw that in the briefing that the Ministry of External Affairs did today, it also stated that in order to mitigate some of the economic difficulties faced by the people of Sri Lanka, India has extended support of about $2.5 billion in the past 3 months. This includes credit facilities for fuel and food. Since mid-March, 270,000 metric tons of diesel and petrol have also been delivered to Sri Lanka. And in addition, around 40,000 tons of rice have been supplied under the recently extended $1 billion credit facility to Sri Lanka. How do you see this working out? Because we also find that India has always had this relationship with Sri Lanka, which is old, which is time-tested. And today, in a time of crisis, India is extending all it can to help Sri Lanka. Do you think this will also go a long way in cementing this bilateral relationship?
Well, you are absolutely right. We have these historic and significant ties with Sri Lanka. And they don't go back only to 500 years. If you go back to Ramayana days or something like that, then you have still far more closer relationship. People connect with one another. Of course, there is another factor, chameleon factor there. But at the moment, what I'm seeing is that India, like it has done always, India is the first responder in any emergency for any country in our neighborhood. We have been always trying to assist, be it Maldives, be it Bangladesh, be any country, Nepal. We have done it always, and so we did in the case of Sri Lanka. And that's what the good neighbors do. And so India has provided nearly $2.5 billion in loans and in currency swap facility to buy the petrol, the fuel, or for that matter, the food supplies. India just only 2 days ago sent about 40,000 tons of diesel to Sri Lanka. But there are systemic problems in the country, and people are frustrated also with the political dispensation there, and they feel that they have not been responsible, or probably they have been responsible for this. I mean, there are a lot of people who are now talking against or protesting against the Chinese loans and very high interest loans which were not sustainable, and despite that, the Rajapaksa government of that time went ahead and did it. So the political dispensation cannot absolve responsibility totally, and that's why people are asking them to go. Now, we have seen that in a situation like this, while the popular sentiment could be there, so they tried to have some kind of a national government that did not work out. The people did not come up on board. The new finance minister who was appointed, he was a former justice minister. He, within less than 24 hours, he resigned. So what we are looking at is that there has to be some kind of a consensus administration in the interim, and the help from international community to tide over these immediate problems. Then what will happen? India is doing what it can. It is doing much more than it would normally have done, and I think it is going to do much more as the request from Sri Lanka keeps coming in.
Ambassador Tribhunath, we also see that the public anger is at a very high pitch in Sri Lanka. We have seen visuals of crowds attempting to storm the homes of several government figures, and there have been large demonstrations everywhere, with students also marching towards the Prime Minister's house this evening. Do you feel that this also spells some kind of a security risk, not just for Sri Lanka, but for the region? And would you say that India has something to worry about this?
There are, as you know, as I mentioned earlier, there are terrorist elements, there are also extremist elements, and in such kind of a situation, these fringe elements tend to take advantage of the situation. Then we are also hearing news that many people have already started, leaving Sri Lanka and coming to India, especially from northern part. So that obviously is among those who are these people, whether they have any extremist links or terrorist links. So that to that extent, it directly impacts, and indirectly also India knows that all its neighbors, including Pakistan, we have always believed that politically stable and economically stable countries are far more in the interest of India, than a destabilized country, any of those. So that is why it is good that the situation hopefully will stabilize sooner than later, for which, of course, some very, important decisions which may not be to the liking of the people will have to be taken. And now they are talking to the IMF also. So IMF comes up with its own structural program. How that program pans out, how is it accepted by the people, how the belts are tightened. I mean, those are the kind of things that will have to be taken. And the Chinese have still not agreed to defer their payment of the interest and all that on the loans. So if they don't do that, then we are looking at another, crisis situation.
Ambassador Tribhunath, we've also seen that there has been a critical lack of foreign currency, which has left Sri Lanka struggling to service its ballooning $51 billion foreign debt. And the pandemic has also added to its woes, with the vital revenue from tourism remittances going down. And there seems to be no end to the economic crisis of Sri Lanka apart from the political one. Do you feel that Sri Lanka will finally have to reach out to IMF for a loan? It also seems to be a move which will be unpopular in the country. How do you see the international community reaching out? And do you see Sri Lanka finally having to reach out to IMF and other institutions, financial institutions, to bail itself out?
Well, they have taken in the past, I think about 16 times or so, they have approached the IMF earlier. But of late, the government has not been keen on going the IMF way, because that will demand a lot of restructuring, controls and all that. within the system, more transparency, accountability, and whatnot. And that was one reason. Then I guess the Rajapaksa government preferred to go to India and China and to bail out. But I think that now these countries also have their own limitations. I think they have to go. They are talking to. The committee has been set up, and they have been talking to IMF people. But IMF is also watching at the moment. So we have to see how it plays out. There would be no doubt, as I said, very difficult decisions to be made, both on the recommendations of the IMF as well as such, the government will have to take those decisions, whichever government comes into power. Because today the people are really frustrated with the Rajapaksa government. They are directly holding them responsible. That is the reason that their houses are being targeted and demonstrations and protests are being made. So when people don't have the basic necessities, it is no point faulting them. Or even if you want to try to create an emergency kind of a situation to prevent riots and other things, it actually multiplies many times. That's the reason they had to lift the emergency. They imposed it. Similarly, social media. You see, people need to express themselves also. Of course, in this kind of a situation, there are unruly elements, the gundas and all these kind of criminals who take advantage, and the extremists as well do take advantage, who have to be prevented from doing so. But it's a very, very complex, very, very difficult situation in Sri Lanka at this stage, and the international community has to provide them at least the food and other assistance as soon as possible. Of course, their fuel costs, again, a problem of factor of this Russia-Ukraine war, because we see that the oil and gas prices have gone up. So they are also creating a problem in their foreign exchange kitty. I must say that the Sri Lankans have, because see, they get about $17 billion about 2 years from the tourism alone. So a lot of people wanted to come in. Russians come in big way into Sri Lanka, but because of this war and all, those also stopped. So I think that they are trying now very hard to try to attract, but when this kind of demonstrations, instability in the country, who's going to visit there? Now that is the situation that needs to be resolved. I would say, it's like the Matrushka doll, Russian. There is a complexity inside the other, inside one side. That's the kind of a situation that is currently prevailing, I guess, in Colombo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates around the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will embark on a 2-day visit to the U.S. on the 11th of this month for the India-U.S. 2+2 Ministerial Dialogue in Washington. Dr. Jaishankar and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh will lead the Indian delegation at the 2+2 talks. The U.S. delegation will be led by Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Briefing media in New Delhi Thursday evening, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said the 2+2 dialogue mechanism will also provide the opportunity to exchange views about important regional and global developments and how both the countries can work together to address common interests and concerns.
The dialogue would enable both sides to undertake a comprehensive review of cross-cutting issues in the India-US bilateral agenda related to foreign policy, defense and security, with the objective of providing strategic guidance and vision for further consolidating the relationship. EM will also separately meet his US counterpart, Secretary Blinken. EM is also scheduled to meet senior members of the US administration to further advance the India-US comprehensive global strategic partnership.
India's exports of agricultural products for the year 2021-22 have crossed $50 billion. This is the highest level ever achieved for agriculture exports. India has also achieved its highest ever merchandise exports of $417.8 billion. Commerce Industry Ministry said that India has achieved highest monthly value of merchandise export in March this year, amounting to $40.38 billion. This is an increase of 14.53% over $35.26 billion in March last year. India crossed $400 billion merchandise exports in current financial year, 9 days ahead of schedule. This is the first ever time in history that India has managed to break free of the band of $300 billion, which used to be India's exports figure in the past.
Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal has said that India-Australia Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement will help us to double the bilateral trade in the next 5 to 6 years. Speaking at an event organized by Business Council of Australia, Mr. Goyal said both the countries must aspire for a $100 billion bilateral trade target by 2030. He stressed on the need for greater engagement in science and technology, research and education. Yemen's exiled president Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi has transferred his powers to a new presidential council and dismissed his deputy on Thursday as Saudi Arabia moved to strengthen an anti-Houthi alliance amid UN-led efforts to revive negotiations to end a bitter 7-year war. Riyadh announced $3 billion in financial aid to the Saudi-backed government after the announcement by President Hadi. It called for talks with the Houthi group that controls the north and has been battling the Saudi-led coalition. Yemen's warring sides, in a major breakthrough, agreed last week on a 2-month truce that began on Saturday, the first since 2016. The deal eased a coalition blockade on areas held by the Houthis, who ousted Hadi's government from the capital, Sana'a, in late 2014.
In Burkina Faso, former President Blaise Compaoré has been sentenced to life in prison for his role in the murder of Pan-African leader Thomas Sankara nearly 3 decades after the fact. The verdict, announced on Wednesday, brought to close a 6-month trial about the murder of Sankara, who was assassinated during a coup led by his friends and comrade-in-arms Compaoré on 15th of October 1987. 7th of April is World Health Day. The day is celebrated annually, and each year it draws attention to a specific health topic of concern to people all over the world. The day marks the anniversary of the founding of the World Health Organization in 1948. A report.
This year the theme for World Health Day is Our Planet, Our Health. WHO will focus global attention on urgent actions needed to keep humans and the planet healthy and foster a movement to create societies focused on well-being. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has extended his greetings on the occasion of World Health Day. In a tweet, Mr. Modi wished everyone be blessed with good health and wellness. He said it is also a day to express gratitude to all those associated with the health sector, as it is their hard work that has kept our planet protected. The Prime Minister said the Government of India is working tirelessly to augment India's health infrastructure, and the focus is on ensuring good quality and affordable health care to the country's citizens. He added that it makes every Indian proud that our nation is home to the world's largest healthcare scheme, Ayushman Bharat. On the occasion of World Health Day, Ministry of Ayush organized Yoga Utsav at the Red Fort in New Delhi, marking 75 days countdown to International Day of Yoga. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla, Union Ayush Minister Sarvanand Sonowal, other Union Ministers, Members of Parliament, ambassadors of various countries, prominent sports celebrities and yoga gurus took part in the event. They also participated in the Common Yoga Protocol demonstration. Speaking on the occasion, Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla said, yoga is accepted all over the world as this traditional system is very important for a lifestyle. Ayush Minister Sarvanand Sonowal said that yoga is a practice that brings about harmony between the body and the mind. Abhishek Mukhopadhyay for World News, All India Radio.
In Korea Open Badminton Championship, PV Sindhu and Kidambi Srikanth have stormed into the quarterfinals in their respective categories at Suncheon. In women's singles, Sindhu defeated Japan's Aya Ohori in straight sets 21-15, 21-10. The third-seeded Indian will next face Thailand's Busnan Ongbam Rungpan, whom she had defeated in the final of Swiss Open last month. However, Malvika Bansod failed to advance to the quarterfinals, losing to Thailand's Porpawi Chochuang 8-21, 14-21 in the second round. In men's singles, Srikanth beat Israel's Misha Zilberman 21-18, 21-6. However, World Championship bronze medalist Lakshya Sen's run at the tournament ended with a straight game loss to Indonesia's Cesar Hiren Rutsabito in the second round. In IPL cricket, Delhi Capitals have set a victory target of 150 runs before Lucknow Super Giants in Mumbai. In reply, Lucknow Super Giants were 104 for 2 in 14 overs when reports last came in. Earlier, Lucknow won the toss and elected to field. The Indian women's hockey team is set to take on the world number 1 on the Netherlands in their next set of FIH Pro League matches, which starts at the Kalinga Stadium in Bhubaneswar on Friday. The last time both teams faced each other was during the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 in their group stage match, where India lost 1-5 to the Netherlands.
A report from the business desk.
The Sensex plunged 575 points to finish at 59,035. The Nifty also slipped 168 points to settle at 17,640. In global share markets, Asian stocks market declined in line with a global sell-off as markets were spooked by more aggressive noises from the US policymakers about the need for tighter monetary policy, which also kept the dollar near a 2-year peak. Japan's Nikkei tumbled 1.7%, while South Korea's Kospi and China's Shanghai Composite Index both declined 1.4% each. Hong Kong's Hang Seng fell 1.2%, and Singapore's Straits Times ended 0.6% down. European shares markets were trading mixed in intraday trade. Oil prices rose as worries over tight supplies still clouded the market outlook. The crude prices climbed around 1.5% in intraday trade. Brent crude was trading around $102.90 per barrel. Back home, gold prices climbed 230 rupees, was trading at 51,825 rupees per 10 grams. Silver prices also gained 230 rupees to 66,535 rupees per kilogram, and the rupee weakened 20 paise against the US dollar. The domestic currency closed at 75 rupees and 96 paise per dollar. Rajesh Lake for World News, All India Radio.
Now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let's take a look at press reports on China. AP writes Australia has accelerated plans to buy long-range strike missiles years ahead of schedule because of growing threats posed by Russia and China. The print writes, stung by issues with China-made tech, Pakistan military is back to wooing US for defense.
Now let's have a look what made headlines in Nepal. The Kathmandu Post writes that the main opposition party, CPN-UML, and other fringe parties on Tuesday refused to sign the commitment paper prepared by the Election Commission to implement the Election Code of Conduct.
Now let's have a look at the press reports on Pakistan. The Daily Times writes that Prime Minister Imran Khan has written to the Supreme Court requesting the establishment of a high-powered judicial commission to investigate the Lettergate scandal. The news report says a prospective ally of PTI, Tehreek-e-Labaik, Pakistan, has warned that Imran Khan is conspiring to abrogate the constitution.
Now let's have a look what made headlines in Afghanistan. Tolo News quotes UNAMA saying that the closing of girls' school is discriminatory.
Now let's have a look at what made headlines in Bangladesh. The US has offered Bangladesh to assist in the modernization and institutional development of its armed forces by providing defense equipment and training, reports the Daily Star.
The Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports has released India's contribution of $72,124 to UNESCO Fund for Elimination of Doping in Sport in 2022. It is a considerably enhanced contribution of twice the assessed value. As per the resolution of 7COP held at Paris in September 2019, the state parties had agreed for 1% of the contribution of the regular budget of respective nation to UNESCO towards the Fund for the Elimination of Doping in Sport.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Pakistan Supreme Court reinstates National Assembly, orders voting on no trust motion on the 9th of April. New Delhi says it is focusing on stabilizing economic relations with Russia and watching developments in Sri Lanka to help mitigate economic situation. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh to lead Indian delegation at 2+2 India-US talks to be held on the 11th of April in Washington. India's agricultural products exports cross $50 billion for first time. Yemen President cedes powers to Council as Saudi Arabia pushes to end war. Yoga Mahotsav celebrated at Red Fort in New Delhi on World Health Day. In Korea Open Badminton Championship, PV Sindhu and Kidambi Srikanth storm into quarterfinals in their respective categories at Sanchun. And in IPL cricket, Delhi Capitals set a victory target of 150 runs before Lucknow Super Giants in Mumbai. And now, before we end, let's listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Germany.
Para मन निश्चल रखे धन धन जानने देनी रे वैष्णव जनता तेने कहिए जे पीर पराई.
We end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.